I'd like to give you a warm welcome and invitation to IRA's next Harm Reduction Conference, which is Harm Reduction 2009. It'll be our 20th conference, and we are holding it in Thailand. Many people have wondered why we've chosen Thailand. Well, there are a number of reasons. First, the conferences are taken around the world because we need to move it around the world so that different people have an opportunity to join in. And some time back, the IRA executive board decided that it was time to have it again in Asia, where it hadn't been for some time. We have tremendous support from the region, from the UN organizations, from NGOs, from civil society organizations, from drug user activist organizations. They want us to go, and that's why we want you all to come to Thailand. So I very much look forward to seeing you there next year. Thank you.
I got a brief statement to read from Vocal, the New York City Drug Users Union, and NICAN, New York City AIDS Housing Network. A statement from NICAN Vocal to the international harm reduction community. Drug users in Thailand are facing a frightening emergency as the government restarts a deadly drug war, which literally means a license to kill for law enforcement. As many of you are aware, on April 2nd, 2008, the Prime Minister of Thailand announced that the police would have special powers to track down drug users in order to reduce the demand for drugs. When this same policy was enacted in 2003, police and security forces murdered over 2,700 Thai citizens in the course of a few months. The police also committed thousands of other well-documented human rights violations. Suspected drug users were beaten, tortured, and forced to confess to false accusations. Many continue to be systematically denied access to medical care, including HIV medications. NGOs throughout the country report difficulties supporting drug users in receiving HIV treatment and drug treatment since the announcement. An estimated 50% of drug users in Thailand are HIV positive. HIV prevalence in Thailand has declined overall, except amongst people using drugs. Experts attribute this to the Thai government's refusal to implement comprehensive harm reduction policy and programming, as well as their resistance to include drug users in treatment and prevention programs. Next year, the International Harm Reduction Association Conference will be held in Thailand. Hundreds of openly identified drug users will be traveling to a country where the Prime Minister himself has said killings are impossible to avoid in a drug war. Vocal, as a union of active drug users, calls on the International Harm Reduction Association, IRA, to change the venue. If the venue is not changed, we will assume that IRA can guarantee the safety of drug users. The only way to do this is to commit our collective powers to ending the drug wars in Thailand, and may I add, everywhere. Thank you.
Last time I was in Thailand during the war, and it was like, somebody comes to the room and says, oh, somebody has been just shot randomly like yesterday. And all my friends from Russia, they go out to get drugs, and I'm just sitting there just totally like paranoid and everything, that it's dangerous,
People are really worried about whether this might happen again, and there's been a lot of advocacy around the world with the Thai government, with UN organizations and so on, trying to urge caution on the Thai government. And so far that advocacy seems to be working.
Well, basically, I think we have to be careful about how we portray Thailand and the war on drugs. I think that at present time, it's difficult to say that there is a war on drugs that's ongoing. What's happened is that the Thai government has released a new drug control strategy on April 2nd. And based on that, there has been no action to date. There's obviously immense fear, especially at within the international community and with some of the groups in Thailand who think that there might be a repeat of the events of 2003. However, up until now, we've not seen evidence that there has been any changes in the way that the Thai government has proceeded in terms of drug control. As a harm reductionist, we say that we advocate for evidence-based responses. I think in this case as well.
Make it safe for all participants. We try to do the best medical services and harm reduction services we can in the context of the country, and we're working on that now. We're also working with the UN agencies to make it safe for drug users to come to the country.
Our concern about the conference being in Thailand isn't about the drug users that would come to the conference. I think they would probably be fine. It's that if they leave, then what happens? Will the government take out any kind of anger or frustration on the drug users that are already vulnerable in Thailand? That's a concern, and that needs to be looked at very carefully before they decide to go in there. And they need to talk to the Thai drug users.
Well, I think from the standpoint of the Asian Harm Reduction Network, having the conference being held in Thailand is an opportunity for advocacy and to move things forward. There's different aspects to that, and there's obviously some risks also that are involved there, but we still think that it's an opportunity. The constituents of the Asian Harm Reduction Network that we've consulted, especially our Thai colleagues, are very much in favor of having the conference in Thailand. So just for that, that's enough to hold for us to justify having the conference in Thailand.
In our view, this is a tremendous advocacy opportunity to go to Thailand, to talk about harm reduction, to talk about public health, to talk about human rights, and to remind people that there are strong alternatives to wars on drugs and wars on drug users.
I'm not convinced for basically two reasons. The first reason, I don't really see a solid plan how this conference is going to work as an advocacy tool. What are we really going to do? I mean, it's all kind of very vague statements about that it's going to have some influence. And another issue that I have is I don't genuinely believe that IRA conferences make any difference, to be honest. We went to a bad harm reduction place last time, Poland. We thought we're gonna make some difference. The conference didn't do any difference in Poland. The methadone problem is as bad as it was, and there is no follow-up. If the registration fee was 3 times less, and we could have at least 3 times more people there, it would be bigger and maybe more noticeable, but for now it's just a tiny, friendly, nice conference.
I have to admit I'm torn, because I think that going to a country that's persecuting drug users and drug sellers kinds of makes it seem to people as if we are not opposed to what's happening. At the other hand, as a supporter of Barack Obama, I believe that it's important for us to talk to the people who are on the other side of the aisle and look for ways to bring them over. So I can't say that I think it's a horrible thing, and I do believe that any place where you can have a conversation about harm reduction and open some minds is a good thing.
I think we need to be able to look back to say, look, if this is the third time we've gone to Thailand, has it made any difference, to the mindset of the government there? Has it changed anything there?
Well, it always depends on what you do and how you use it. If we manage to get the world's attention to the very serious situation in Thailand and remind them of what Thailand did during the last war on drugs, and that, if the conference can be used that way, then it may be a good decision. But if it's not, then it's a horrible decision. So we need to get IRA to being very vocal. I know that last time they weren't vocal enough, and that many people were upset about that. That shouldn't happen again.
One way to improve the situation in Thailand through our advocacy practice is one of the ways could be to get the royal family involved. Also, I still think that giving the Thai government a fair chance to get involved in a meaningful way in the conference is important as well.
In fact, we already have promises of substantial funding from the UN, one of the UN agencies, to bring drug users from the region. So they are confident that this will be safe for people. But we will work with the Thai authorities on this. I should also say that we're not working with the Thai government on the conference because they will not be partners in the conference, but they will obviously be invited to participate.
The fact that the organizers of a harm reduction conference would put drug users in harm's way and then sort of use it as a political tact, saying that, that we can use it, as advocacy. I think it's kind of fucked up. If maybe they're just interested in reducing the risk of bloodborne illnesses, but we're talking about the, harm reduction like from bullets and imprisonment and beating. It's sort of like the NAACP in America, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the African American organization, going to South Africa in 1982. It would be fucking ridiculous, obscene, and I think it's kind of obscene.
Well, I think there's strong arguments both sides. I think it's disgraceful that any country would execute anybody for anything, particularly drug use. But I do think at the same time you need to bring people on board, you need to encourage them, whatever small steps they're taking, they need to be encouraged by the global community. I think for the sake of drug users in Thailand it's better to bring people in to organisations like this, involve them, make them part of a global movement. And I think ultimately, having the conference in Thailand will ultimately benefit Thai drug users. So I think it's on the balance. I do see the argument against having the conference in Thailand very strongly, but on balance, I think it's better to go to Thailand, have the conference there, try and encourage the government and the powers that be in Thailand to think more in terms of harm reduction and respect for human rights.
Both of them were actually rights, but I don't know if the International Harm Reduction Association can really secure that drug user will not get busted in Bangkok or in Thailand. I think we might have a lot of chance to move things forward and change things around in Thailand. I think I have to support this because it's not easy, but what is easy in this world, right? We need to do something.
I think we have to go there, no matter what the risks. I mean, it's more dangerous being a Thai in Thailand than it is for us foreigners, and I think it's a good idea, because just to go like that.
If you see how we went, how IRA and the conference were there 2003 with the first drug war, they were like non-political and didn't really react in a way they maybe would do now. Now, recently, they are taking more care of the political part of harm reduction with installing also HR2, the Harm Reduction and Human Rights department of IRA. And from an advocacy point of view, if IRA managed to go like with, head up to go there and to claim what they want to claim in harm reduction and in Thailand, then for the advocacy part this could be a good case. On the other hand, if you don't look at it from the advocacy side but as individual drug user, not everybody is just on medication. A lot of our peers and members are also using illegal drugs, and then of course it becomes more individual and painful and riskful to go to a country where you don't know where you end up if you get caught with dope on you. We ask IRA and all organizations involved to assure the safety of people who use drugs to go to Thailand. And I don't speak about medical things like harm reduction equipment or prescribing, but then I mean safety, like criminal justice safety, because it's for individual drug users not that obvious to go to Thailand.